Welcome to the JHM B6, B7, A4, S4, RS4 shifter knob install and informational video. These knobs will basically fit any clamp-on style knobs, so they'll also fit some newer Passats and some newer A6s and Allroads as well with a clamp-on knob. So now I'm going to start first by showing you the parts. And first we have is the JHM knob. This is a Delrin unit. You can get this in aluminum, get all kinds of different patterns, get a knurl for grip. As you can see, it's got some nice steel down here. This thing weighs, this one weighs 10.6 ounces, and the aluminum one's going to actually weigh more than that, probably about an ounce heavier, maybe even 2. So this is definitely heavier than our current screw-on version. So this is a prototype, but this is how it's going to look pretty much. You have the knob, you have the steel insert that's a perfect fit for the shaft. We have this Delrin bushing right here with the taper to it, and this Delrin bushing, what this Delrin bushing is going to do is push the boot just like stock right up into the shift knob so it looks clean. It's also going to come with 2 shims to help make sure this is tight. You'll see when we get there. The final kit's going to come with 2 shims. I'm only using one. This was a prototype, but we got 2 shims in case you have different thickness leather boot. Most people should use 2 shims. We also have these 2 little screws, these little grub screws. You're thinking, oh, grub screws, they're going to strip out, they're not going to hold. Well, you got to remember that these grub screws are screwing into steel, not aluminum like some of these cheap knobs. These actually screw in, they're 10/32, so it's a fine thread, so you get more threads for the distance. And it's going into steel, so the steel's not going to wallow out like aluminum. Also, the final version grub screws have like a serrated edge on the end. It's like a knurling, and they're grippy, and they're designed to bite in, and they're not going to loosen as easily. So we are very confident this is going to hold for a long time, especially since the knob is really tight. It's going to fit perfectly on the shaft. It's not going to wobble around, and these just keep it from twisting. So if all they're doing is holding a twist, and they're not dealing with, you know, forward-backward movement, that's going to be fine, especially with the serrated edge and the steel. And if you're concerned, you could always throw a little Loctite on there. So those are the parts, and now I'm going to show you how to install this and exact details. The only tool you need is a 3/32 Allen for the grub screws, and basically any tools to get the stock knob off. This obviously is not on the car. This is on I just have it clamped in a vise, but you'll get the point. I mean, these pretty much just pop right out of the car, and then you go ahead and do it. I actually got that one backwards, but these just pop right out of the base. They got little clips. So you'll pop this out, and then the next thing you'll notice when you're trying to remove the stock knob is at this point right down here, it's going to have a clamp. If you still have a factory shifter, which this is a factory shift shaft, I wanted to show that it worked on a factory shift shaft. It obviously works on a JHM shifter because we retain the exact stock knob. So anyone that works like stock should be fine. But right here, you're going to remove a clamp. It's like a CD boot clamp. It's a one-time use. You need to get in there and pry it apart and break it apart. And then the knob, what happens, if you have that original clamp, then the knob will slide off. If you don't have the original clamp, it's probably a screw-on clamp or something else. You can always just back that off and then get the knob off. And then once the knob's off, what you need to do is you now need to separate the knob from the boot. And what you'll see here is this thing's stuffed in there. This one, since it's been laying around the shop for so long, this one's missing a piece. But basically on your car, you're going to have a plastic little piece right here that snaps on. And when that piece snaps on, that's what holds the boot onto the knob. So the boot is not part of the knob, it's just snapped together. So you just get a screwdriver in here and you pop this piece out. And then once you pop that piece out, like I said, this one's missing, but it's not a big deal. I mean, you just pop this plastic piece off, it slides off the end, and then you just go ahead and just pull your knob out. And then you got your boot free. Now at this point, you're ready to install the JHM unit. The JHM unit, if you look, is designed to drop perfectly down the shaft, and you're going to end up lining up the hole with the divot in the shaft. So you're going to have to eyeball that. Yeah, there it is. It's lined up right there. But we got to get the boot on there. We got to get a lot of things on there first. So to get the boot on, what you want to do is you need to stick it inside of here. And when you shove it inside of here, it's going to be a tight fit, and you don't want this to roll over. So you want to hold this up, and you need to take your time and work it in there. If you need to cut it back a little bit, but you got to make sure this is not rolled inward, backward, whatever. And then that's going to slide up inside of the knob. You want to make sure it's face down. And then what I do at that point, I just turn the whole boot over and make sure it's slid inside. Get the whole boot upside down. And you can see it's stuffed in there pretty good. You don't want it rolling out. You want it stuffed in there. Now the next thing you're going to use is our insert, our Delrin insert with the taper, tapered side down. And that's going to bite on it. And this is where normally you would have two of these spacers, these metal shims. Like I said, this one is a prototype, so we just made it work with one shim. But normally most of you guys should be able to use two shims on this. And then what you do is you put the two shims in. If your boot's too thick, use one shim. That's why we gave options. And then we want to make it easy for everybody to do this. And then what you do is the screw, if you could see, the screw is going to hold the shim down and the bushing down. So you want to make it a tight fit. So I'm going to start this screw, and I got to hold this down. It takes a little bit of pressure. And then make sure you get it started. And you get it started just enough, because you don't want the thread, if you look, you don't want the thread poking out. Then you can't slide it over the knob. So you get it started just enough where it's sticking back. You get that one on there. So now the boot's held in. And then you get this other one. What you do is you only want to do one, because you got two. The reason you want to do one, it's easier to line up the notch. So then what you'll do is you'll drop this down, and then you look inside of here, and you look for that groove in the shaft. And then once you line up with the groove in the shaft, then you got to do the same thing. And this takes some pressure, because you want this tight on the leather. And you can see I got it started. And I'm going to wiggle it, and you'll feel it when you get it in the groove. When you get it in the groove, you're not going to be able to pull it up and down anymore. You're only going to be able to rotate it. See how it's not tight enough? So what you got to do is you got to play with this, and you got to wiggle it. And once you get it in that groove, see, I can't go up and down, but I can still rotate it. So you got that one where it's kind of snug, dragging just a little bit, maybe back it off a hair. And you get that one. They're both in the groove. It will not go up and down. So now this is the point where you square your knob up in the car. You get your 6-speed pattern or whatever pattern you picked squared away. So you can just turn this knob all you want. You get it squared away. And then once you got it perfectly lined up, you go ahead and tighten these down. And once again, these are in steel, so these are going to be nice and tight. And on the final version, we're also going to include 2 extra grub screws in case you're one of those guys who has a tendency to strip stuff out and maybe you're taking your car apart all the time, who knows what. But we're going to go ahead and throw in 2 extra of those screws. Like I said, the final screws have a serrated edge, so they're going to bite really good. Then after that, you drop your knob down. Another thing you'll notice, you can see the boot's a little twisted. So this is another problem you got to worry about. You got to worry about, as you're putting the shim up in there, you got to get your boot oriented properly with the knob. So that was a concern. I obviously didn't do that when I did this. I just wanted to show you one of the problems you'll run into, which is, the knob's going to be all, twisted up. So all you got to do to fix the boot and get it straight, you just loosen the 2 grub screws, bring the Delrin piece down, and then, rotate the leather. And actually, if it's not too tight, you should be able to rotate the leather. This one looks like it's still loose. So you may not have to undo it. This one, the leather is still got some room to twist. If yours is too tight to twist the leather, you're going to have to back that off, but this one does. So as you can see, it's a nice clean fit, tucked up in there. It's not going to come out. It's not looking cheap. You don't have clamps and zip ties and all kinds of stuff hanging down. One other note about the final unit. If you look at these little set screws or grub screws, you notice that they're going to stick out a little bit. The final ones, we're giving you shorter ones as well. So these shorter ones are going to be under and behind this steel shim, or flush with it. That just keeps it from rubbing on your boot over time. If you're concerned about your boot as well, just take some tape and wrap it around with some electrical tape to give it a little rubber insulation. But the final ones are going to be shorter, so they're going to be almost flush to this surface. But that's our design. This is the JHM weighted shift knob for B6, B7 clamp-on knobs. And like I said, this will also fit C5, A6s, and all-roads, and any other car really, a newer Passat with a clamp-on knob like a Passat W8 or a newer one. It might even fit others. We haven't figured that out yet. But that's it. Thank you for watching.